Hi everyone. I'm going to teach you about glazing today. I can't wait. Look, that's how you get color on your friends like this. I'm going to teach you a couple of techniques, first of which is called Wipeaway. You may remember this from our cuneiform assignment. I'm also going to teach you about normal glazing. I'm going to show you about how to use glazes, how to fix a glaze if it's perhaps too stiff or dried out, things like that. At any rate, let's start at the beginning. So you have gotten your bisqueware out of the kiln and you have sanded and washed. Remember, after you wash, you need to let it sit for 24 hours because basically your object is like a sponge. It's going to have sucked up a bunch of moisture. But I can shortcut if I sand and then I want to do Wipeaway, and that Wipeaway is what that's about, is about putting color into the little nooks and crannies or the incisions or impressions for an effect. Sometimes it's like a good way to get a low light. Like let's say you're going to paint someone green, like a light green ultimately, but you want a dark green in the recesses. So you could do a dark green Wipeaway, and the following day when it's dry again, you could do your light green glazing normally. And I'll show you Wipeaway technique first. Very commonly, I use black for Wipeaway. I always check my glaze first. You might need a tool like this Williams tool, otherwise known as a hoop tool, and you want to scrape your glaze and make sure it's a good consistency. You want it to be liquidy, but not too liquidy. At any rate, prep your glaze first. I then select a brush. Now, when I do Wipeaway technique, I'm trying to concentrate on getting the glaze into all of the nooks and crannies. That's the goal. Because what I'm going to do is then wipe it away, leaving it in the nooks and the crannies. All right, so basically I'm applying glaze into all the recesses and such. All right, when you're doing Wipeaway technique, this is Wipeaway technique, you need only one layer of glaze. You don't need multiple layers. So Wipeaway is a one-layer technique. All right. So just for the sake of expediency, I'm going to be done with this. Now the way this works, Wipeaway, you can do this at the sink, and basically you can stand at the sink with a sponge. You can literally have the water running, and you can literally just let the water run over it because the glaze is not going to wash out of the nooks and crannies. It's going to stay there. But the action of the sponge, as you can see, removes some of the glaze. And how far you want to go is up to you. I like to have a little antiquing effect, so I go pretty aggressively in removing the excess glaze, but maybe this time I'm going to leave a little extra. As you can see, I keep flipping the sponge. You want to always continue to have a clean part of the sponge. You don't want to keep dragging like a sooty black, ness over your piece if you're trying to get a clean black, and I do that by flipping the sponge often. So I'm getting my guy the way I like him. Now this is Wipeaway technique. Wipeaway is effective for putting glaze into incisions or impressions, or again creating a low light effect where you want to put a base color on the piece underneath and then you're able to put a lighter glaze on top. All right, so this is pretty good for now, but that's Wipeaway technique. In general, if you have saturated the piece with water like I sort of have here, because it's hard to imagine this, but a bisque fired piece that's fired to cone 04 for a cone 5 clay is basically, it's like a sponge. It's soaking up the water, and therefore it won't be able to accept new glaze for probably 24 hours. So basically, I'm done with this guy for today, so I need to park him until tomorrow when he's dried out and is ready for more glaze, etc. So again, Wipeaway technique. Wipeaway, one layer of glaze, Wipe off the excess with a clean, moist sponge. Again, you can do this right at the sink, etc. But that's sort of the feeling with Wipeaway, is that you get a partially glazed piece. Good for antiquing. All right, so that guy is done for today. Now, in the event I want to glaze a piece in its entirety, or I want to put like a solid coat of glaze on a piece in order to get good color saturation, to get that bright red or that bright purple that you see on the tiles, what I'm going to do instead is apply glaze, and I'm going to not wipe it away. So again, I prep my glaze, make sure that that's stirred up well. The thing to remember with normal glazing is that you're applying 3 to 4 layers, or at least to the thickness of a dime. Unlike paint, glazes are actually melting into the clay body at their formulated temperature. So we fire to cone 5, which is about 2350 degrees, 2250 Fahrenheit. And so basically this stuff we're applying, which is a combination of basically tiny bits of silica and colorants and fluxes and such, it's actually melting into the clay. So to just apply a little bit, and everyone says this, they're like, that's not red, it's pink. Well, guess what? You're going to change colors when you get in the kiln and get fired up to 2250 degrees. This is it's formulated to become red in the kiln. So I just applied 1 layer. And I can tell you this about red. Red is greedy. White is greedy. There are a lot of colors that they need a solid, true application of 3 to 4 layers, or the thickness of a dime, in order to get good color saturation. So I have 1 layer there. I apply a second. All right, when that dries, and you notice it will dry because the piece was dry, because I let it sit 24 hours for when I had previously sanded and washed. At any rate, once this dries, I can apply a 3rd layer, and then I probably, with red or white, I should apply a 4th layer. Most glazes are pretty good at 3 layers, but some of them, like I say, are greedy, and they want 3 to 4 layers, truly. At any rate, while I'm waiting for this to dry, I'm going to demonstrate, like if I want to put a color beside that, I can do so. So I've got a purple here. I always wash my brushes before I use them to assure that they're clean and I'm not going to get a cross-pollinated or polluted effect. Glazes, if they touch, they're probably going to run into each other. So by applying that glaze, and in this case I'm getting sort of a watercolor effect because they're both wet, but the point is, if glazes are touching, they're probably going to blend. If I maintain a little line of separation between them, chances are good they're going to stay where they are and they're not going to intermingle. But if indeed they're touching, they're going to mingle in the kiln. Now some glazes are formulated to run. Like they want to, with gravity, will run down the piece. Others are pretty stable. I like to say the Crayola colors like red, white, purple, green, blue, the more standard colors tend to stay where you put them. They melt into the piece rather than melting down the piece. You need to always be aware though that, and check with me, some glazes like to run and they will move down your piece depending upon how it sits in the kiln, that gravity will win and they will move down. But again, these colors are pretty stable. As you can see, my red is drying. I can apply a 3rd layer to that. Getting the feeling? So glazing can be a little tedious in that sense, that like you want to get the thickness. Now, the corollary being, if you want just a watercolor effect, apply a very thin layer. You can use these like watercolors, but like in the case of red, 1 thin layer. Purple, same thing. If you want a very thin layer, just apply 1 layer. But you'll get a very kind of translucent, transparent effect that, it may be a bummer because it won't look like the tile. You'll be like, that doesn't look right. But that's just it, is that, it's going to be a far more translucent and less you know, kind of color dense, color saturated piece. Now I'm doing a little Wipeaway on this just for fun. You can experiment with these things. If you're going for a watercolor effect, you can do things like this. You can layer colors on colors. So I had a little purple back here, I can lay a little red on it, etc. So you can experiment by layering colors on colors. In fact, I've been known to apply a color, let it dry, put a whole other color on top of it, and then scratch through with a tool, so to speak, to reveal the glaze underneath. And you can basically allow that color underneath to bleed through the top color, which is kind of an interesting way to approach it. So, like paint, you can layer glazes and such. But if you want to get good, clean color separation, you should, quote, keep them separated like this. Like keep a little tiny line of naked clay between colors. The other thing is it's not uncommon to take a pin tool or a knife and clean out, you know, clean off some glaze. In fact, if you want to paint a little like different colored, you know, detail on top of that, I like to erase the glaze, you know, scrape it away, and then you can paint this safely, and you will get that marking without it bleeding so much. But that would require at first removing an excess amount of glaze, because all of a sudden if you're putting like 3 layers of red or 4 layers of red, and then you're applying a couple layers of purple on top of that, you're now at 6 layers of glaze, and basically you're chancing it like blending all together. So little details like this, scrape away clay or leave it naked. I don't have a pin tool available, but that's kind of what I would do. This was the effect I was saying. If you scratch through the clay or the glaze, you can reveal the under glaze, etc. So this is some basics for glazing. Wipe-away technique. You want to use 1 layer of glaze, then wipe it away, clean moist sponges. Normal glazing, 3 to 4 layers. Remember, 3 to 4 layers, that's the thickness of a dime. So don't be surprised. These things are dry and sort of chalky, and that's how they behave. Another important thing to remember is that when you're done, please screw your lids on tight before you leave your table and you walk back and put these away. Brushes go into the sink, the back sink, into the bucket of water. That way they don't dry out. And the glazes have their homes. Remember, we have 4 different areas of glazes. They're color-coded by lid. Greens obviously live in the center section because they're from a company called Spectrum, and that's how that works. So that's a little bit about glazing. Have fun with glazing. I like to say take your time. You've worked hard on the piece, the sculpting. Do not let yourself down by sloughing off some cheesy glazing. All right, that's enough on this glazing video. Thank you. Bye.